I'm so excited. I've been looking forward to this for quite a while. I want to thank Dan for being willing to be a guest on this Thurnauer Talk. Thurnauer Talks are a series of in-depth virtual discussions with members of our musical community. We've had a few so far. This is the first in quite a few months. And again, thank you, Dan, for being a guest. I want to give a special welcome to Dan's father, Stephen J., you can wave so people know who you are. There you are, with us from Philadelphia, and members of Dan's family, his brother Matityahu in California, and possibly his
my family. I think
what's that?
That's it for my family, but we have
okay. And maybe Dan's daughter will be joining a little later. We'll be showing Dan has a long and varied personal history, both in music and in other fields. I've long been fascinated with his just why many hats that he wears, both in his roles at the music school, but also beyond the music school in his other work and his other interests. He's a modest person with many, many talents and lots of knowledge and skill. And I'm not saying that just because his father's on the video, but we'll be seeing a little bit of one of Dan's videos that he made, professional videos they made involving Marion McPartland, and we'll be seeing some old photographs. So I'm gonna spotlight Dan and unspotlight myself, and kind of get the ball rolling. So Dan, I know you come from a musical family, and that's probably an understatement. Can you tell us a little bit about your sort of personal history as a kid in music?
Sure. I would say like music is like the family business, or at least it was up until me. And my, but my father is, it goes back. My father is a musician, academic. He was the dean of the Manhattan School of Music for a number of years, as well as various colleges and conservatories, including the University of the Arts in Philadelphia. His father, David Jatovsky, my grandfather was a piano teacher and my first piano teacher. And his sister, and I don't know if you want to bring up some of the pictures if you want at this point, but
I'll bring them up.
So his sister, that's my grandfather at the piano, and as I said, and I presume his apartment in Austin Street. So
is that in Queens? You said
in Queens, yeah. They lived on Austin Street in Queens. Dad, were they at Austin Street at the time this was taken? I think they were there. You were there some time you were born, right? Yeah. So. Yeah, on Austin Street. Yeah, it was a fairly small apartment, but he managed to cram 2 pianos into the living room. So he would teach on one and the student would be on the other one. And that's him. He was a bit of a commie, I think you would say. There he is in his like Cossack uniform with my grandmother and
where was he from, Dan? What country?
But he was born here. Background goes back to Russia, so I believe I'm correct. His grandfather was a conductor in the Tsar's band, so it goes. Like I said, a family business. There he is after World War II with my father on the right and my grandmother left on the roof of the apartment building. So my grandfather fought in the Pacific and in World War II. And as I was saying, his sister, you can bring up his sister, that in the center there, that's my great aunt Nellie. I never met her, but she was the leader of an all-girls jazz band, and Nellie J and her Jaybirds. So if you look closely, there's a strong family resemblance with her, I would say.
Are there recordings of that band, Dan?
No, they're not famous enough to have recordings. I've looked up on the internet and found some articles about where they performed here and there. This is in the 1920s. By the time my dad was born, he tells me he didn't even know that she played the piano till I found a picture of her at the piano. She was an accordionist. The band long since disbanded.
Mhm.
So there's it's a long family background in music, and so all of us grew up playing music. I started on my sister started on piano, and then we took secondary instruments. My secondary instrument was the flute, and there's a picture of me on the flute with my father playing.
Yes, I'll bring that up.
You can bring that up, but
Yeah.
and my sister's second instrument was cello. There I am at some performance. We don't know. I mean, I keep getting asked. We have no idea who the woman in the mirror is. No idea.
It's a bit spooky, but it's cool.
Yeah.
How long did you play flute for, Dan?
I started. I think I must have started flute when I was maybe 8 years old. That sounds about right. So I mean, I started playing piano probably when I was 4. Right, Dad? 4 or 5 years old. You don't remember?
Oh, probably.
Yeah. Okay. My grandfather was my teacher, and then I took flute as a secondary instrument. My sister took cello. My brother Ronnie, who's no longer with us, he somehow didn't start on piano. I'm not sure how that happened, but he just was on violin, and Matthew Matitiyahu. I'm sorry, I grew up as Matthew, but his first Matitiyahu now, so that's fine. Yeah, he was the caboose baby, so he came back along much later. So. And also on a piano. And did you take a secondary instrument, Matthew?
It was piano, starting at Manhattan School of Music.
Right.
And then violin.
Yeah, violin. Okay, violin. Okay.
It was clearly a very musical family, Dan. Was there a lot of? I mean, being also that your dad was the dean of MSM, were there a lot of musicians coming and going? Did you go to a lot of concerts? What was your musical life like?
Well, we did go to a lot of concerts, both at MSM and elsewhere. I remember, I went to at least one of the young people's concerts that Leonard Bernstein did when it was at Carnegie Hall. So I don't remember a time when there wasn't music. That's so it goes back too far. I don't remember when I learned music. My dad was, speaking of accomplishments, he introduced, or he and a partner, Arpa Darash, introduced the Kodai solfege system to the U.S. He wrote a textbook on that, and I don't remember not knowing solfege. So that's kind of deeply ingrained in me. And we like I said, we didn't start at Manhattan School of Music. And by the way, because like I said, I played flute, my sister played cello, my brother played violin, and my dad, we have family quartet. So we could do like Baroque music where flute could substitute for the violin. So we would have we had some family performances. I'm getting some stuff digitally transferred now that my grandfather recorded. So I'm waiting to get that back.
You're not
reel to reel.
That's great. Did you I'm curious, why did you stop playing flute? Do you remember?
Well, I stopped when I was, it was really when I went off to college. I kept playing flute through high school. I was in the orchestra in high school. So I did musical things in high school. I also, on piano, I accompanied the choir. We had a trio. We did the Brahms trio, a friend who played cello and another played clarinet.
Well, that's pretty advanced stuff to play a Brahms trio. Which Brahms? Do you remember which Brahms trio?
The clarinet trio.
Clarinet trio. Oh yeah, that's impressive.
Yeah, that was a lot of fun. We had a wonderful in my junior high. We had a wonderful music teacher. He came in after 6th grade. It's actually the music teacher that I had in 6th grade died over the summer. Very nice gentleman, but not one I really respected as a music teacher, unfortunately. But Mr. Higgins came in, and he was a professional musician. He played in the pit orchestras on Broadway, and he treated us like professional musicians. And that is, at a concert. This is one of the things I learned. At the previous one, like we had a concert at school, and he would have like the orchestra. He had the curtains down. I think his name was Mr. Maynard. He would have the curtains down, and everybody would get on stage, and then he'd make sure everybody was right, and then the curtains would go up. Mr. Higgins said, "That's not the way you do it. Professionals, you walk on stage. There's no curtain down." So we just, when we were ready, we walked on stage, took our place, started warming up. We did it like professionals. So, and he treated us that way, and he gave us advanced stuff to do. The year after I left, when I went to high school, and he was no longer my music teacher, but I went to the concerts because my brother and sister were in the orchestra there, and they did the Rite of Spring.
Wow.
Junior high school orchestra.
Junior high school? Wow.
Yeah.
So, that's amazing.
So I got a good musical education.
Clearly.
A great musical education.
Yeah. And then it came time for college. I know you didn't study music in college, but you studied interesting field.
Yeah, what happened was, just backing up the history a bit. So my grandfather was my teacher up until I was I think 10, 11 years old. He died, which was really, really, really tough. Really, really tough. Just kind of like I've seen students who've we had one of our teachers did pass away a few years ago, Svetlana Myasnikova, and it was very tough on her students. It's tough whenever you have to change teachers. I feel really bad in retrospect to the poor music teacher, my piano teacher my father first found for me. I'm sure he found somebody who was wonderful, but I would not listen to her at all, because anything she said that wasn't the way my grandfather taught me, I couldn't hear it. And it was at that point, I guess, that we switched over to the Manhattan School of Music, where he was not yet the dean, I think. Were you the dean at that time? Not yet.
I don't remember.
Yeah, I think it was another year or so before. But anyway, so then I and my brother and my sister, and eventually my other brother who's on the call, we went to Manhattan School of Music, the prep division there, and my teacher there was Zenon Fishbein, and I was, who I listened to. I respected him, but I was not a good piano student, and that is a student, because I'd say my advantage was that I was a really good sight reader, and my disadvantage was that I was too good a sight reader, which is to say I didn't practice. Okay. I'm not sure my dad knew how little I practiced sometimes. And I know, yeah, and I'm sure I wasn't not fooling my teacher. I'm sure he knew, but by then my dad was the dean, which meant that my dad was his boss. So I'm pretty sure he didn't report on me to my dad that I wasn't practicing enough. But when it came time to making a decision about what I would do with my life, he cautioned me against becoming a professional musician, and he was right. So, because I had that in mind that I might do that, so I didn't. And
then you went to Columbia, if I'm not mistaken, right?
I went to Columbia
University. Uh-huh.
Right, and I was a math major because I like math. I was really good at math, and so I was a math major at Columbia. I was in actually the honors math program. There was like 16 students in the honors program. But I found after the second year, I actually struggled for the first time with math. And I in my second year, in my sophomore year, I realized that it wasn't. I think I pretentiously said to my dad that like the poetry had gone out of math, And I realized that all the other 15 students, for fun, they were reading math books. You know, that was like what they did in their spare time. And I wasn't. And I look at what was I doing in my spare time? I was going to movies. I hadn't really, I mean, I'd watched lots of movies, but I was starting to watch movies a little more seriously. So that's what I was doing in my spare time. I was in New York, and there's lots of revival theaters, I'd go to the Thalia, and which is now Symphony Space. And so I was reading books about film, and I took a film class with Andrew Saris, who's a great film critic. And so when it came time after my second year, by the time I was in my second year, I could always say I did not leave my parents to go to college. They left me. They had moved to Wisconsin. My dad became the president of the Wisconsin College Conservatory, and so they were in Wisconsin. I was left behind in New York, and so. And also, among other things, at that time, I could say I found, I would say, the book that changed my life. The book that changed my life.
That changed your life.
The book that changed my life.
By the way, before you tell us,
yeah,
that's a pretty strong statement. I'm curious.
Yep. Well,
I mean, something to think if anyone else has had a book that changed their life. But go ahead, tell us what it is.
I've seen that. Well, I've seen, there's a book I've got about the movie that changed my life, but the book that changed my life. So the first semester at Columbia, I was commuting. And the reason I was commuting is because the rule at Columbia is you were entitled to a dorm if you lived more than 25 miles away from school. And we were living in Great Neck, which was 24 miles away from Columbia. So I wasn't entitled to a dorm. So I was commuting on the Long Island Railroad. And one day on the way back, I had some extra time. My train didn't leave for a while, and I hadn't brought a book with me. I didn't have anything to read on the train. So I went to one of the kiosks where they sold books, and I saw this title said Hitchcock's Films, which is actually a classic book now by Robin Wood. English film critic. And I found my way through it. And I said, well, I've seen maybe of the 10 films he discussed, I'd seen 7 of them. So I said, oh, this might be fun to read, learn a little bit about it. And so I got that book, and I had not thought about film as a serious art form before. I watched films, I liked movies, but I hadn't really thought of it as something that I would take seriously and study and criticize and analyze. And that changed the way I looked at movies. So yeah, I would say that changed the direction of my life. And so when it came time after my second year, and I was not going to be a math major anymore, and I think my parents kind of encouraged me then to, why am I paying the, Columbia's expensive, very. And they had moved to Wisconsin, which had an excellent state school, University of Wisconsin, and maybe it would be a good idea to see if there might be something closer to home where I could get in-state tuition. And I looked at what the program they had there, and they had a very, very strong film studies communications department. They had a very strong film studies department. And so I transferred to the University of Wisconsin, where I got my film education and where I could see an incredible number of films.
And were you much happier once you were studying what you were passionate about?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Plus, I had plenty of time to watch movies. I would routinely see, this is my film education, at Wisconsin, they had lots of film societies. There was estimated to have more per capita film watching than any place in the world. And I was a big part of bringing the per capita up because I routinely saw 20 films a week.
Wow.
On Wednesdays, I would often see 7 films in a day. And I could do that because I'm a morning person. I set it up so I was always done with my classes by noon. I took morning classes exclusively. 7:30 class would be a class on Fellini. We'd watch a film. 11 o'clock, when my classes were done for that morning, I would go to the library and watch a I was doing a paper on Monogram, a B film company. So they had those hour-long films. And then I was reviewing films for the college newspaper. So the films opened on Wednesday, and 1 o'clock I would go to the theater and watch the movie so I could review it for the paper. And at 4 o'clock, the film union had showings at 4, 6, 8, and 10. So I would see the 4 o'clock show there, and then 6 o'clock at 3 different film societies, 1 at 6, 1 at 8, 1 at 10. That's 7 films.
That's amazing. That's amazing, Dan. And I know to this day you watch a lot of films, and I know that
I do.
You and Stephen Mazzy have nice conversations about film, and you share that passion. I'd like to jump around a little bit because I know we can go chronologically, but if we could stay on film a little bit, I know you studied film at NYU, but to this day you're teaching film, or you have taught film at Essex Community College, right?
I've taught there.
What kind of,
there, yeah.
Can you tell us what kind of classes you've taught? Because I think this is also interesting for people to know.
Well, I've taught what there's called Introduction to Film.
But I mean, in addition to the film classes, I guess. But
what else do I teach there?
Well, I mean, tell us about the film classes, but
I usually teach English composition. Right now, I'm teaching English, the English 102, which is English literature. Really, whether I'm teaching film or English composition or literature or anything I've taught. I've taught a class in art. I taught music once, and the main challenge that I have with students is critical thinking skills. I find students are very passive. They're used to, and not whether it's movies or they're not used to like interacting with the text. They want it to come to them. So a class becomes like I'm supposed to entertain them instead of having a dialogue, a conversation. So and certainly I don't think that's the right way to approach this, but
I know you taught some music appreciation courses, including classes on rock and roll, if I'm not mistaken, right?
I didn't teach on rock and roll, but I would say I did teach. It was just one semester because the person who was teaching it was had a medical issue and they needed somebody at the last minute. I couldn't say I was really qualified as such to teach it, but yeah. So there was actually two classes I taught. One, I can't remember the title of the class was, but I looked like in the professor's cabinet to see what materials he had that I could use, and he actually had a video there that I had edited. He did a video called The Spirit Travels, and it was hosted by Linda Ronstadt, and it was about the immigrant music experience, and that was part of the topic for this particular class. So I guess that was a good sign. And then I did teach a sort of music appreciation course, which I just borrowed heavily from Peter Schickley and Schickley Mix. I went through the playlist of Schickley Mix and so I could keep the class interested. So it wouldn't be all classical music. It was, borrowing from all genres. I don't teach film chronologically either. I don't go from 1900 to.
I think what not everybody realizes is that there's certain days of the week that you might leave at a certain time and go directly to teach, or you might teach in the morning and then come to the JCC, right?
That was correct. I mean, when I was working part-time, when I first came to JCC, so I mean, I had a career in film, and I guess we'll get into that, but yeah. When that business wasn't going anywhere, and I was pressured to bring some money into the household. So that's when I started teaching, and also and I did start working at the JC. It was that simultaneously, and it wasn't just going from there to put a living together as an adjunct. I'm sure some of our teachers here will sympathize with this, because some of our teachers they teach at a public school, they teach at the JCC, they teach it, they piece it together from a lot of places. I did that by teaching at several different colleges. So, I taught at not just Essex County College, I taught at Bergen Community College, I taught at Passaic County Community College, I taught at the University of Phoenix. They have a campus in Jersey City. And that would be like all four. I was teaching, 2 classes here and 2 classes there. So yes, it would be, drive from Newark to Bergen County, drive from Bergen County to JCC, on one day. And then it was insane, but I wasn't the only one who did things like that.
Well, I know when you first started working at Thurnauer quite a while ago, I think it's around 18 years ago, you started off really taking over the bookkeeping role of, our purchase orders, managing the income, and right away we could tell that you were, pretty sharp and also had the music side. And, we feel very lucky that you eventually moved into a much more active role, which we'll touch on in a minute. Since you mentioned your career in film, I'd like to share a clip of one of your videos. So I'm not sure whether to call it a film or video, but if you could set this up for us so everybody knows what this is.
Sure. So that's Marion McPartland. So one of the I worked on a lot of different projects. I started off as when I got out of film school. So I went to NYU Film School. I graduated from there in I don't want to date myself. When I graduated from film school, I knocked on a lot of doors because I didn't really know how to network. I was not very good at that. But I knocked on a lot of doors, and one of them I knocked on was a production company, Burt Brown and Associates. They were looking for a production assistant, and I did that for a while, and then they gave me something to edit. I was a pretty good editor. That's maybe my strength. And eventually I became the editor for this company. I got paid bupkis, but it was still. And then one of the projects that came in, a man, Burl Crone, who was and you can show a picture of me with him later, or now if you want. Because it's somewhat later. But so he came. This was a time when there was cable was just kind of getting underway, and there was a cable company which was called ABC Video Enterprises. That's Burl Crone, and I know it's terrible. It's a Xerox of a picture, but that's a later project we did on the history of jazz. So it's Burl in the center, and on the right, Chick Corea, and me on the left. So this was this company, so ABC Video Enterprises, which later became Arts and Entertainment and then A&E, which still exists. But at the time they were, searching around. They were women focused. Okay, so they got a proposal to do a series on women in jazz, and so it became a 7-part series. It's originally supposed to be 6, but we managed to squeeze in a 7th and get a little extra money out of it. 3 were on singers, and those were hosted by Carmen McRae. And then there were 4 on women who instrumentalists. Mm-hmm. I didn't know at the time that I had a connection with my great aunt to women in jazz. Mm-hmm. And so Marion was the host, and we shot her, and we used a lot of archival footage. You won't see that here, but a lot of archival footage from a collection from David Chertok.
And not everybody might not know, or in case you didn't know, Marion McPartland also has a connection with Thurnauer, in that she, along with, thanks to our friendship with the great jazz bassist Rufus Reid, performed a Gift of Music gala many years ago. And she was charming, she was wonderful, and gave a terrific concert. So I'd like to play just a little bit of this, Dan. Sure. So everyone can see Dan's work here.
But sometimes you hear more in your head than can possibly be expressed on a single horn. You hear the texture of several instruments playing in harmony, and you want to create a whole structured piece of music in which the various solos are set like diamonds in a crown. which brings us back to Carla Bley. When I orchestrate, I orchestrate for 6 horns. In fact, even before I orchestrate, my chords rarely have more than 6 important notes in them, and rarely less. So I need 6 horns all the time. And I don't need any more. I wouldn't know really what to do with 7. As Carla says, she writes for the 6 horns in her band as well as the rhythm section. But really, she's writing for the people who play them. She gets to know who the musicians are, what sort of sound they get out of their instrument, the way they solo. She's making the whole band an extension of herself. Duke Ellington used to write that way, and it's what gave his band its distinctive sound. For Carla, as it was for Duke, the band is her instrument.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'll just second that. Marion McPartland was one of the nicest people I've ever met. She was a wonderful lady, and I can say that in between like a lunch break or a long break we had once, she taught me how to play the blues. so pretty good go-to teacher for that. Yeah, she was wonderful. To be fair, I was the editor on this, so I did not. Although there was one episode that I don't have a copy of that I wrote, but I did have a lot of say in how the programs were shaped, because editing wasn't just cutting things together; it was deciding what would go first and how it was going to be shaped. I worked with Burl closely on that kind of on that.
Yeah.
It was also fun. I went on the shoots, which you don't often get to do as an editor. I got to, I was on that set with Carla Bley and many others. So it was a great experience.
Yeah, and I know every once in a while it seems to come in handy at the music school when we're videoing the kids, and you can advise us sometimes on setting things up and creating a storyline, etc. I want to hop around to something else. I know you have a daughter, Rachel,
Yep.
and Rachel has her passions, why don't you tell us about what it is, but also maybe advice that you might have to parents of young children who have a major talent the way Rachel does.
Okay. Well, as I said, when I was I passed on my interests to my daughter, sometimes to her. She jokes to me about it, that I passed on her, made her a super nerd by getting her interested in the 3 deadly things: classical music, chess, and old movies. So passions that she still shares with me. So she too didn't go into the family business. She took piano lessons, she took clarinet lessons, but her passion was chess. I played chess. You can see that there's a picture of me playing chess with my daughter. You can bring that one up if you like. And so she pursued. There she is, at age like 7 or 8, I suppose. So that's yeah. She's just posing at the piano. She didn't actually play at age 2. And there we are. I think at this time I could probably still beat her. That's not true anymore. So that was what we spent a lot of her youth doing. And she also played tennis, and she was also she actually went to NYU also to film school as an undergraduate, but then she switched to math, so she went the opposite direction. And so I think this, I'll just go on my, well, one thing, as far as advice, kids are going to follow their passion. I do think that having a good music education is important, whatever field you go into. I think it's helped me enormously in ways I might not have expected. I also think that there's a relationship between music and math and chess. I think they have related skills, and that is that they're all they all require ability to recognize patterns. And I don't think it's coincidental that those three areas are ones where you get lots of, you get child prodigies. You don't get too many child prodigies who write literature, but you get child prodigies in music like Mozart and Mendelssohn. You get child prodigies in chess like, you know, Bobby Fischer and anyone out of my head, Magnus Carlsen, the current world champion. And you get child prodigies in math like Blaise Pascal. He wrote his first proof when he was 11 years old. So I think they're related. And because of that ability to recognize patterns. And one of the things, I was just thinking about this the other day when I was thinking about what I might talk about today. A quick story first. This will seem irrelevant, but it's not. When I was, I think maybe 12 or 13 years old, I went to a concert in Manhattan School of Music. And I may be conflating two concerts. I know there was one with Janos Starker, and this particular one, I know they had something by Richard Strauss, one of the tone poems, maybe Don Quixote. I don't remember exactly. But as I'm sitting there, it's not making any sense to me. I got confused, not because the music was difficult or anything. I couldn't hear it. It by the way gave me a lifelong loathing of Richard Strauss, but I don't think that's his fault. All of a sudden, it was just, there was notes, I could hear them, but they didn't make any sense anymore. Now it turns out later, I was actually sick. I had a fever, you know, I wasn't well. But I realized, maybe I was 13 at the time, I realized this is how a lot of other people hear music. They're not hearing what I hear. They're hearing notes, they're enjoying it, but they're not really understanding it as any more than, you know, a pleasant experience. The same thing goes with movies. People watch movies and they're not analyzing them, they just enjoy it. So it makes me sympathetic to, but I also think, by the way, it can be learned. It's not because you're born with it or not. You can learn to understand the patterns. It requires a good music education. So where I'm going with that is, so I'm thinking this the other day in the car that, you know, when you, part of what makes music enjoyable, and movies too, because I say these are all related, is if you know enough about it, you know the possibilities. So what I mean by that is, if I'm in the key of C major and you play a G major chord, if you're a musician, you know where it's probably going to go, or at least where it's most likely to go. Most likely it's going to go to C major. It's going to go to the one chord, but it doesn't have to. It can go to a 6 chord, it can go to a 2 chord, it can go to some totally unrelated thing, go to D flat major chord. It's nothing in common. But when you hear the chord itself, if you know music, all those possibilities are in your head. It could go, you know where it's likely to go, but they're all in your head. And so here's the math part. That to me is like quantum mechanics. Like the position of an electron it's not determined till you look at it. But before you look at it, the electron is everywhere at once. It's not in a particular spot. It's more likely to be in some places than others. So it's like a probabilistic thing, but it's not, it's everywhere at once. So that to me is like what music, when you really understand it, is. You're hearing every possibility, or you know that every possibility is there. And what's pleasurable is finding out where it goes, but you have a balance between knowing where it's likely to go and then being surprised. Right. There's two things. So knowing where it's likely to go in movies, that's suspense.
You know, many years ago, Rob Capello, who was our current artist in residence and the artistic force behind our We Came to America project, which coincidentally is also relating to immigration. You mentioned the film, where I think you said about immigrant music earlier. many years ago, probably 25 or so years ago, Rob gave a parent education event at the very beginning of the year. Dorothy had this vision to have a major inspiring artist or person do something at the beginning of the year to help the parents get excited about the journey. And Rob used a film comparison to help explain music appreciation. He talked about how in James Bond films, there's going to be a villain, there's going to be a chase scene, there's going to be some gadgets, you just don't know which one. So the awareness is part of it, but the surprise and the possibilities is part of it. But it also brings me to, I want to bring it back to Thurnauer, Dan. I have to say, I enjoy, I enjoy knowing that, 1 minute you're working on an intense spreadsheet, because I know that budget spreadsheet. And the next, you're kind of talking to a 3-year-old about the crayon drawing they have of of an airplane. And I'd like to just sort of hear your perspective about what you've enjoyed about working at the school, what you think of some of your highlights of your time have been, and also, I could add to this, but what your contributions to the school have been, because I know they've been many.
Okay, well, you can add those, I guess, but well, coming to Thurnauer through a rather circuitous route it was kind of like a homecoming, because I grew up in a music school. I grew up at the Manhattan School of Music, and which Thurnauer has somewhat of similar philosophy in having there's not just taking lessons. You've got an orchestra, we have a lot of chamber groups. I don't think we had School of Music as much, though we had some, and we have theory classes, and a variety of things. The difference is that there it was like all one day on a Saturday, all day, and here kids come during the week, but it's the same thing. So that it felt like I'm home in a sense. And yes, I'm working on spreadsheets and databases, and all that stuff, by the way, is still it's still being able to see multiple possibilities at the same time. It's still related to the same kind of skills. My uncle Boris, my mother's brother, was a computer scientist, and actually one of the first to get a degree in computer science. And he wrote some number of textbooks, and he told me once that the only test he ever knew reliably that could predict whether somebody would be a good computer programmer was whether they could do the New York Times crossword puzzle in ink. Because to do it with ink without erasing stuff, it means that you had to know what 5 across was, guess what 5 across would be, but then test it against 5 down and 6 down, and then maybe also test 10 across before you finally commit to putting in ink. So being able to hold all those things in your mind at the same time was the ability, was equivalent ability.
So, sorry, Dan, go ahead.
Go ahead. No, that's fine. Go ahead.
Well, you mentioned that it feels like a homecoming and familiar, through the circuitous route. But now that you've been in the role for a while, I'm curious what you most enjoy about, being part of the school family and also the work that you do. Yeah.
Well, one of the pleasurable things for sure is seeing kids grow and develop, because I never got you don't get a sense of that when you're a kid. You're growing up at the same time as all the kids, and now I'm seeing kids who I first saw them 10 years ago, when they just were starting out, where I have no judgment of how good they're going to be. Some of them stayed for quite a while. So now hearing somebody like Quincy and Miles Eby who are very talented. Quincy is like major talent on the violin, but I remember Quincy when he was shorter than Dorothy and not twice as tall. So so that's that's a lot of fun, seeing how they develop and how they, and thinking about what they're going to be down the road, and whether or not they become professionals or not, it's really not important. We've had some really fine musicians who are going to college now, and they're going to be engineers or biology majors or whatnot. That's fine. They're going to keep playing music. It's going to keep helping them in their careers and in their life, and not just enjoying the music. That's, I think, my point. It's not just you learn to appreciate music. You learn to music, understanding how music is put together helps you understand how other things are put together.
For sure. I want to say one thing towards the end, but I want to jump back to film.
Sure.
Then I have one other question, then I'd love to open it up for questions and comments from everybody else. Do you have films you would recommend to the group, or perhaps a list you'd like to share via the chat? Because I know that you and Steve and Mazzy often talk about films, and or do you have a favorite film? Anything you'd like to share?
I have a favorite film. I also have and I will. I've got I haven't updated in a while, but I actually have a Google spreadsheet with my top films available on Amazon, because everybody's on Amazon. So I'll put that link in before we go. But no, my favorite film of all time is Vertigo.
And why is that?
Rob Capello said something interesting at one of the lectures he did for us last year, that he thinks of composers in two different kinds of composers. There are melody composers and there are motivic composers. Like Brahms is motifs. Not that they can't write a melody. Beethoven builds from small motifs, and whereas Tchaikovsky is more of a melody composer. And I gravitate towards the motifs. Not that I don't like composers who write wonderful melodies, but I gravitate towards that. And I think it's true in film also. There are films that are more plot driven, they're more emotional, and it's not that I don't like emotion. And then there are films that are more based on repeated motifs and patterns, and I like that better. Hitchcock does that a lot, and Vertigo is like a prime example of that. It's got, I don't know, I was captivated when I was a kid when I saw it in black and white, because we only had a black and white TV, and I didn't know anything about film. It captivated me then, and it still does. So, and it's also been voted by critics as the best film of all time, but that was,
It's a great film. Well, what I want to say towards the end is something I may have alluded to at the beginning, but you wanted me to say more about your contributions to the school. I think that's partially because you're humble or modest. But I can say, especially since before Dan joined, I did some of the roles that he's now doing, but he's taking things to a much another level. There's a lot of things involved in keeping the school going. And each of us on the administrative team has our role, and we're all doing as much as we can. And we try to coordinate it so that we're working together as a fine oiled machine to the best of our ability, so that we can all give the services that ultimately reach the students and their families and help them and the community and in the music. The nuts and bolts of it often are things that Dan has either implemented or significantly improved, and or is just doing on a day in and day out, week in, week out basis. A few examples I'll just give is he streamlined the payroll process. He brought in years ago our current database, Jackrabbit, which was a big deal, finding and implementing it. And now he's introducing a new one, which I know the faculty on this call may have heard about. And that's going to, I think, be another big improvement. He's done other things relating to policies and procedures. But on top of all that, I mean, that would have been enough. That would have been enough. But he's also, because of his background in music and his background in education, he's able to sort of be part of our planning and implementation of things relating to music education. You know, and it's really a lot to find in one person, all these skills and knowledge all in one person. And I think he's always looking for ways to improve the processes, and because, you know, we do the best on the budget that we have, and it's we always need to streamline, we always need to improve efficiencies. And I think Dan is very, very hardworking, but also smart working. You know, he and I will have discussions about how we might be able to do a little differently here and a little differently there. But he also, this could go back to his interest in math and in film, but he's left and right brain, you know, just like involved with chess and just with math. You have to be creative, but you also have to have the technical, just like a musician. Musician has to have the physical, you know, all that stuff on, you know, the scales under their fingers and their whatever it might take on their instrument to make the sounds and do it reliably, but then to be expressive and to understand the whole context. It's left and right brain in action. So Dan brings that kind of approach, I think, to the administrative side of what he's doing relating to the financial component. But then, you know, he's got the personal side, which is, you know, the customer service. He gets I think the full picture, having been a child of a musician, as well as a parent of someone who's was very serious about something that they're passionate about. So I'm sure there's much more that could be said or detailed about that, but I'd like to take that opportunity to, oops, I lost everybody for a second. Where did it go? To thank Dan for giving us this time and for sharing so openly. And I'd like to give everybody here a chance to, you know, add some comments or ask a question. You can either put it in the chat, or you can unmute yourself and ask a question, or add a comment. So anybody would like to get the ball rolling?
Okay.
Francie, are you trying to unmute there?
Yeah, I'll just say, aside from being a fellow Bogosian, Dan is one of my favorite people. He's my go-to person. He's my audience for my chamber ensembles. And no matter how busy he is, if I walk into the office and I say, Dan, I have a group, they're ready to play something, we're in our studio, do you want to come and listen? And he always says yes, joyfully. And he comes, he makes them a little bit nervous. And I just think that's another great quality that he has.
Thank you. I see a couple questions in the chat. The first one, I don't know what, I'm sorry, I'd say I don't know what an air dose number is. So I've never calculated it, obviously, because I don't know what it is. Maybe, Gabrielle, do you want to explain to me what an air dose number is?
Oh, I'm sorry. It's just, he was a famous Hungarian mathematician. And
Okay.
I happen to be a journalist, and I happen to have interviewed a lot of true prodigies, mathematicians and so forth, and who would completely agree with you about chess, piano, math, all being on the same spectrum. I would throw in Latin in there, although they don't teach that much anymore. That's also very common. But anyway, I always used to ask them what their air dose number is.
I'll look it up and calculate it and see.
Okay.
Okay.
And there's a question. First of all, going back to Francie for a second, do you want to explain what a Bogosian is? Dan, do you want to explain it?
Dan can explain it. We're living in the town of Bogota, New Jersey.
Right.
That's what a Bogosian.
Before I was ever at the music school, you know, so when she came in, and I didn't know you were a violist, so one of those coincidences of life, you know, it happens. So Sherwin is asking, how did my family decided when you decided to depart from the family tradition career? My recollection is my dad, if anything, he pushed me away from being in the music career. Because not that I think he would have minded if I'd chosen it, but I don't think he never pushed me towards you got to be a musician. It was definitely not something. I would say that I think one of the things I wanted to talk about just briefly is I talked about some of the ways that music helps with organizing your brain and thinking in a certain way, but it also has some practical payoffs in my film career. When I was at the University of Wisconsin, I wasn't thinking of becoming a filmmaker. I was studying film. I was going to write about film. I was going to be a film critic. One of my classmates there became the chief critic at the Los Angeles Times later in his life. So that's what I was thinking of. So, but one thing is one element of music that I also teach. Okay, is music is used in movies, and if you don't understand classical music, and particularly opera, you won't understand movie music, because the first composers who came into Hollywood, I mean, there was always music. There was always, in silent movies, there was music. And the first film score was actually written by Camille Saint-Saëns. A lot of people know that. But the first composers came from Germany, not after World War II, before World War II, early days. People like Ernst Wolfgang Korngold, who's an opera composer. He came to Hollywood. He did, Adventures of Robin Hood and such, and Max Steiner. And one of the techniques they came that's still used is the leitmotif, coming from Wagner. The idea of taking a little theme.
Dan, do you want to explain what a leitmotif is?
Yes, it's a little theme that's associated with a character or an object. So Wagner uses this in the
ring cycle.
The ring cycle, the rings of Nibelungen. There's a theme for Siegfried. There's a theme for his sword. When Siegfried's on stage, you hear it. But if they're even talking about Siegfried, if other characters, then his theme might be woven in there. So Max Steiner, Korngold, and others, they bring this technique in, and you'll know it more from later people like John Williams brought that back. In the 60s, it kind of went away. But when John Williams does the score for Jaws and for Star Wars, you all know, like if I sing two notes, like da-dum, da-dum, it's the shark, it's coming. And you don't even have to see the shark to know when the notes play, the shark's coming. So if you don't understand that, then you don't really understand how music is working in a movie. Mm-hmm. So that's one thing. When I became a filmmaker, I started, as I said earlier, as an editor. And the clip you showed was I was the editor, I wasn't the director, but editing is rhythm. Short, fast, you can have lots of short clips in a row, or fast pace, or slow it down. It's about rhythm. And I understood that. I usually would cut to music. Professional editors often cut to music. And one quick story, I had one job I got after I left Burt Brown and Associates, where when that company went under, I was a freelance editor. So one place I went to was a company called Gindig Productions. So Bob Gindig was the president. He interviewed me. He gave me a little project to do, which is basically cutting some footage to music. And I put a cut together and I showed it to him, and he said, "Oh, that's fine." And I left. I didn't think anything of it. And there was a buzz going around the office. Like nobody had ever gotten a first cut approval from Bob Gindig, ever. Because but all I did was cut to the beat. I cut to the music, and I knew where that was, where other editors put footage together, but they weren't following the music. So I got a steady gig there after that. So, and I've always done that. I use music as, understanding that is helpful, and understanding that is helpful in analyzing film too. Anyway.
Yeah. We never know sometimes how training in one thing might influence another, but especially with music training. Does anybody else have any questions or comments? Anything we want to add or ask? And I think we have a special Dr. J. Dan Stout, would you like to say anything or add anything? You'd have to unmute though. You're muted.
Oh, where am I going?
There you go.
Yeah, I can hear you.
Yeah, I just wanted to say a word about you. It's been a wonderful interviewing experience, really. And of course, you've unleashed a great deal in my son by the questioning that you've done. I think it's been quite extraordinary. As for my son, I think this is one extraordinary experience for me.
I'm glad.
Well, yeah, I didn't say it was good. I just said, so I just appreciate that you've come up with this format, this idea of interviewing people from the school and bringing out as much as you have. It's been quite extraordinary, and I compliment you. I compliment my son. It's been one hell of an interview and presentation.
Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, Michael is. I mean, I've not been on this side of the interview except for a job interview, but I've watched the other Thurnauer talks, and Michael, Michael, throwing the praise back. Michael does a very good job as an interviewer, and I've done countless interviews, in my film career, so I know how difficult it is to do, and so I appreciate that.
Yes,
Thank you, Dan.
My dad may be, may have forgotten that you've also been an interviewer. For a short time, you had a radio show in Milwaukee.
yes, I did.
Yes, you did. Yeah.
Yes, it was an interview program. Okay.
Right. Yes, it was where you interviewed Peter Schickley.
Yeah.
Well, thank you, Dr. J. That I greatly appreciate your comment. It means a lot, especially coming from you. It's been one of the added bonuses of having Dan on our team that we've gotten to know you, and we appreciate that you've come to some of our concerts and master classes virtually. And
many.
Yeah, we appreciate that, and we're glad that the technology exists that you can do that. I want to read a lovely comment from Sherwin. Sherwin, for those who don't know, was a pianist at the school for years, and she writes, "I'd like to add that Dan has an incredible gift at making new people feel welcome and cared about. I'm sure this dynamic that he brings to interfacing with both staff and students and families is of massive import and influence upon the ambience at the school. This was a big deal for me to have his welcoming face and voice there for me each time I came in to serve there. I appreciate you very much, Dan. Wonderful to hear your story. Thank you for sharing it with all of us." Thank you, Sherwin.
I really do appreciate those comments. I'll say just one funny thing about when I was working as a bookkeeper, and then the idea came that I might come on board full time. The front office at that time had two women. One as the sort of Dorothy's assistant, and one as the registrar. And so the idea was it was going to consolidate positions, and I was going to take it. And one of the things Dorothy said what she was worried about was that there wouldn't be a woman there, because after all, because there are a lot of kids, and they need like a motherly presence and whatnot. And I said, well, but I could be a grandfather figure. And he said, oh yeah, you're right. So that worked out all right.
Well, I want to add to this that it worked out incredibly well, and this was a wonderful, wonderful interview. Michael, you're terrific at interviewing, and Dan, it was so exciting to hear the richness of the many things that you've done in your life and your many interests and how they all connect together. So I think we're very, very lucky to have both Michael and Dan as part of the Thurnauer team. So thank you so much.
And I'm putting into the chat for those who are interested, though I haven't updated it, but I'm going to update it a little bit. This is my list of the best films I think on Amazon, but it changes every month. So like half the films that are on there right now aren't on Amazon anymore, but I'm going to update it tonight. So just it's very much my taste. Enjoy what you enjoy.
Oh, I want to thank everybody for coming. I want to thank Dan again for being willing to be interviewed and for sharing so openly. And if you can have the last word if you wish, and we'll say goodnight.
I think I've said too much.
Okay, well, good night, everybody. Thanks again.
Good night.
Thank you for coming.
Good night.
Good night.